All right, so let's talk about something big that just happened. A seismic shift in the political landscape of a state that is, increasingly, at the center of everything, North Carolina. And the man at the center of this tremor is none other than its popular term-limited governor, RoyCooper. On a quiet Monday morning, with the political world still nursing its weekend coffee, the news broke. Not with a massive rally or a flashy video, but with a simple declarative statement that sent shockwaves from Raleigh to Washington, D.C. RoyCooper, after months, even years of speculation, officially announced his intention to run for the United States Senate in 2026. This wasn't just another politician throwing their hat in the ring. This was a strategic move by one of the most successful Democratic politicians in the American South. This announcement changes everything. It's not just about one Senate seat. It's about the future direction of North Carolina, a state caught in a perpetual tug-of-war between its rural, conservative roots and its fast-growing, more progressive urban centers. For Democrats, Cooper's entry into the race is like a shot of adrenaline. It instantly transforms a challenging contest into a potentially winnable one, maybe even one they are favored to win. He is, to put it simply, their A-team player, their star quarterback coming off the bench for the most important game of the season. His decision signals that the fight for North Carolina's soul is about to get very, very real. To really understand why this announcement is such a big deal, you have to understand who RoyCooper is. He's not a political newcomer. He's not a celebrity who decided to dabble in politics. RoyCooper is a creature of North Carolina government, in the best sense of that phrase. His entire professional life has been dedicated to public service within the state's borders. He was born and raised in Nash County, a rural area east of Raleigh. His political journey began in the North Carolina General Assembly. He was first elected to the State House in 1986 and then moved to the State Senate in 1991. For nearly a decade and a half, he served as a legislator, learning the ins and outs of the lawmaking process, building relationships, and honing the political skills that would serve him so well later on. In 2000, he made the leap to statewide office, running for and winning the position of North Carolina Attorney General. And he kept winning. He was re-elected 3 times, serving a total of 16 years as the state's top law enforcement officer. This is where RoyCooper really became a dominant figure in North Carolina politics. As Attorney General, he was a constant presence, tackling issues from consumer protection to public safety. He built a brand as a tough but fair prosecutor of the public's interest. This long tenure gave him unparalleled name recognition and allowed him to build a statewide political network that would become the foundation for his future ambitions. So, in 2016, RoyCooper runs for governor and he wins. But he doesn't just win, he wins in a very specific and telling way. He defeated the incumbent Republican governor Pat McCrory in a nail-bitingly close election, and he did this in the very same year that Donald Trump won North Carolina. Think about that. The state's voters pulled the lever for Donald Trump for president, and then, on that same ballot, pulled the lever for RoyCooper, a Democrat, for governor. That is the definition of crossover appeal. His time as governor has been defined by one central challenge: governing with a Republican-controlled legislature. For his entire tenure, he has faced a General Assembly where the opposing party held the power, and for most of that time, they held a supermajority, meaning they could override his vetoes. This could have been a recipe for complete gridlock and perpetual political warfare, and at times it certainly was contentious. There were major battles over the budget, over judicial appointments, and over social issues. But Cooper's approach was often one of strategic pragmatism. Despite the divided government, Cooper can point to a string of significant accomplishments. He successfully recruited major companies to the state, including Apple and Toyota, leading to tens of thousands of new jobs and billions in investment. He made teacher pay a signature issue, fighting for and securing raises year after year. And perhaps most significantly, after years of Republican opposition, he finally succeeded in expanding Medicaid in North Carolina, a landmark achievement that will provide health care coverage to hundreds of thousands of the state's working poor. These are tangible, kitchen-table accomplishments that he will be able to run on. Now, let's add another piece to this puzzle, because Cooper's decision didn't happen in a vacuum. A few months ago, North Carolina's senior senator, Republican Thom Tillis, dropped a political bombshell. He announced that he would not be seeking a third term in 2026. This was a genuine surprise to many in the political establishment. Tillis, a former Speaker of the North Carolina House, had carved out a reputation as a pragmatic conservative, someone willing to occasionally work across the aisle on issues like immigration and gun safety. He was seen as a formidable incumbent who would have been difficult to beat. His retirement instantly turned an interesting race into a wide-open, must-win contest for both parties. Tillis's decision to step aside fundamentally changed the calculus for everyone involved. For Republicans, it created a massive power vacuum. Suddenly, a safe seat, or at least a seat with a strong incumbent, was up for grabs. This immediately triggered a scramble among ambitious Republicans across the state, each seeing a potential path to the U.S. Senate. The absence of an incumbent means there will likely be a crowded and potentially bloody Republican primary. This is a dynamic that Democrats, and specifically the Cooper campaign, will be watching with glee. For Democrats, the Tillis retirement was a golden opportunity. Running against a well-funded two-term incumbent is a tough uphill battle. Running for an open seat is a whole different ballgame. The odds immediately got better. With Thom Tillis out of the picture, the question on the Republican side is no longer if there will be a fight, but who will be fighting. The field is still taking shape, but a few key names have already emerged. One of the first names to surface is Michael Wattley, the current chairman of the Republican National Committee. Wattley is a North Carolina native and former chairman of the state's Republican Party. He is known as a sharp-elbowed political operative and a staunch ally of Donald Trump. His leadership at both the state and national levels has been defined by a focus on election integrity and a fierce loyalty to the former president. Wattley's potential candidacy represents the modern Republican Party apparatus. He is an insider, deeply connected to the national party's fundraising and strategic networks. And then there is the other name that sends shivers down the spine of the Republican establishment and electrifies the MAGA base, Laura Trump. As the wife of Donald Trump's son, Eric, and a North Carolina native herself, she brings an unmatched level of star power and a direct connection to the most powerful force in the Republican Party. Her candidacy would instantly nationalize the race, bringing in a flood of media attention and small-dollar donations from across the country. She would be a formidable force in a primary, where the Trump name is golden. However, in a general election, she would be a high-risk, high-reward candidate. You cannot talk about this race, or any Republican primary for that matter, without talking about the enormous influence of one person, Donald Trump. His endorsement is, without a doubt, the most coveted prize in Republican politics, capable of making or breaking a campaign overnight. In a state like North Carolina, which he won twice, his sway over the primary electorate is just immense. Both Michael Wattley and Laura Trump have built their careers on their loyalty to him, and, well, any other Republican who enters the race will be forced to compete for his approval. This means the Republican primary will not just be about who is the most conservative. It will be about who is the most loyal to Donald Trump. This dynamic creates a very specific kind of primary contest. For RoyCooper's campaign, this is honestly a strategic gift. The more the Republican primary revolves around Donald Trump, the more Cooper can position himself as the sane, reasonable alternative. Cooper's strategy will be to let the Republicans define themselves as extremists, while he continues to project an image of steady mainstream leadership focused on North Carolina issues. The big question, of course, is whether the Trump endorsement will be a net positive or a net negative in the general election. It will undoubtedly energize the Republican base, driving up turnout in rural and conservative areas. But will it be enough to overcome the potential backlash in the suburbs? The suburbs around Raleigh, Charlotte, and Greensboro are the key battlegrounds in North Carolina politics. So we've established that RoyCooper is popular. But why? What is the secret to his success in a state that is so evenly divided? It's not one single thing, but a combination of factors that form his unique political brand. At its core, Cooper's winning formula is about perceived moderation and a relentless focus on North Carolina-specific issues. He has mastered the art of appearing non-threatening to moderate and independent voters. He doesn't come across as a fiery, progressive ideologue. His public persona is calm, measured, and almost professorial. He sounds less like a politician and more like a concerned school principal. This carefully cultivated image allows him to build a broad coalition. He can count on the solid support of the Democratic base in the cities and the Research Triangle. But his real strength lies in his ability to peel off voters in other areas. He performs better than most Democrats in suburban counties, and he manages to lose by smaller margins in rural areas. These voters might not agree with him on every issue, but they see him as a competent manager who is focused on the state's well-being. His political messaging is another key component of this formula. You will rarely hear RoyCooper wading into the national culture wars. Instead, his focus is almost always on bread-and-butter issues, jobs, education, and healthcare. He talks about recruiting new businesses to the state, raising teacher salaries, and expanding access to affordable healthcare. These are issues that resonate with voters across the political spectrum. This approach will be his greatest asset in the Senate race. He will contrast his record of pragmatic North Carolina-focused leadership with what he will portray as the divisive Washington-centric extremism of his Republican opponent. Make no mistake, this 2026 Senate race is not just another election. The stakes are incredibly high, both for the future of North Carolina and for the country as a whole. For North Carolina, this race represents a fundamental choice about its identity and its direction for the next generation. Will the state continue on a path of moderation and economic growth, represented by Cooper's brand of politics? Or will it embrace the more populist, culturally conservative vision of the modern Republican Party? The outcome of this election will send a powerful signal about which vision has won the hearts and minds of North Carolinians. The race will be a referendum on the two competing forces that have been pulling the state in opposite directions for years. On one side, you have the new North Carolina, driven by the booming tech and finance sectors. On the other side, you have the old North Carolina, rooted in agriculture, manufacturing, and traditional social values. This North Carolina is more rural, more conservative, and feels left behind by the rapid changes transforming the state. Nationally, the implications are just as profound. Control of the United States Senate is often decided by just 1 or 2 seats. A Democratic pickup in North Carolina could determine which party controls the chamber, and therefore which party controls the legislative agenda for the entire country. It would affect everything from Supreme Court nominations to climate change policy to tax laws. That is why you will see an unprecedented amount of money and resources pour into the state from national groups on both sides. This will not be a local race. It will be a national battleground, with North Carolina as the epicenter. For Democrats, flipping this seat would be a massive prize. It would prove that a southern state, other than Georgia, can be won by a mainstream Democrat. It would provide a new model for competing in the changing South. For Republicans, holding this seat is an absolute necessity. Losing a seat in a state that Donald Trump won twice would be a devastating blow and a sign of weakness for their political brand. It would raise serious questions about their ability to win in purple states with a Trump-aligned candidate. The pressure on both sides will be immense because everyone understands that the consequences of this one election will ripple across the entire political landscape. So, the stage is set for what will undoubtedly be one of the most expensive, most closely watched, and most consequential Senate races of the 2026 cycle. This is a race you are going to want to watch.